a brief garage sale. But this could also turn to a series. I got that feeling. And here's what it's all about. And welcome again to another segment of the Grassy Knoll with your guest host, Rod Serling. Just kidding. All right, Bush's New World Order, the meaning behind the words. This is an academic white paper written by a Major Bart R. Kessler, presented to the Research Department, Air Command and Staff College in partial fulfillment of the graduation requirements of ACSC, which is the Air Command and Staff College. Again, this was March 1997. I was sent this by Brian from Washington State. Quite possibly the longest listener, perhaps, or one of the longest listeners to the show. And he's had a garage sale of sorts and sent me a whole bunch of things. And one of them was a PDF, which is this paper. Now, what I went to right away were chapters 6 and 7 of this white paper, and I'm just going to do chapter 6 now. Now, it's interesting to see the military understand what's going on. We've read information that's been posted by the Carlisle War College. They seem a little bit more like warriors no matter what. I mean, and this is one of the things that I guess I'm doing this because of, and that is this idea, again, another one of the false hopes out there that's being promoted by the networks and such. And it's been going on for a long time. I mean, it's like ad nauseum. Oh, this chatter that there's going to be a coup d'etat. Oh, people aren't happy. And then there's other piece of dung that was disseminated by Wayne Matson about the Air Force not delivering from Louisiana to the Mideast certain nukes. Just saying flat out no. I mean, heads would roll. There'd be treason. I mean, and we don't hear anything about this. Now, this was run. Most people picked up on it. I got it through Peter Meyer's mail group. Peter's been on twice out of Australia, and he thought it was spurious to begin with. And then he said, "Well, it was confirmed by MSNBC," and I didn't see that. I trust him. I just, I didn't see where that was confirmed by any other mainstream news source. I may have it wrong, but I just didn't see it. And I think this talk about the military elite going to throw some 7 days in May is baloney. They're about war. That's what they do. And if they see themselves as the new Romans and they see this final run at world empire, which they would rightfully see. I mean, this is what it's been billed as by Ziggy Brzezinski, and even Mackinder from, we've read about Mackinder from early in the 20th century. This is what they're working under, this kind of presumption. And I don't think there's going to be any kind of coup. I know the grunts are never happy, that's for sure. We heard a lot of stories back in the 60s and 70s from grunts of World War II, Korea, and also Vietnam, who knew it was a bag of rocks. We won't go into that now, but so yeah, that's one thing. But the elites, I mean, the generals, the guys that get all that, gold on them, well, they're about making war, and there ain't no chatter, and there ain't no coup. You just keep listening to Joyce and Dave, because Joyce is former military, therefore she must know. Right. Now, this individual, I wonder whatever happened to his career, or what kind of grade he got on this paper. But at any rate, the two chapters I've just pre-read, which is 6 and 7, and the first of which I'm going to share now, very interesting. At least here in 1997, somebody else got it, all right, and understood what was coming down the pike, for better or for worse, but just called it the way I guess he saw it. And with excellent documentation from sources that certainly across decades were very much in favor of what we would really call a world order. And that goes back, obviously even Frankie the Red Roosevelt spoke about that in terms of the world order. So, okay, here we go. This is chapter 6, The Road to New World Order, It is Chapter 6 of this academic paper entitled Bush's New World Order, the Meaning Behind the Words. Something of a worldwide order has been set up by the general consent of mankind and is an active work of which it is impossible to say that any parallel existed before. This is an epigraph that starts off Chapter 6, attributed to an F.S. Marvin from the book The New World Order, published in 1932. What do you know? And here we go. World order, as a set of concepts, objectives, and strategies, is anything but new. George Bush was not the father of New World Order thinking, just an advocate that happened to be in the right position at the right time to flame the fires of the next significant thrust in the evolutionary development of world order. The Bush-instigated post-Cold War New World Order thrust can be interpreted as the third major attempt in this century to create a world ordered by a credible universal authority enforcing the international rule of law through collective security measures, police action, or, quote, peacekeeping. Interesting that he put peacekeeping in quotes. And one other thing, this rule of law, it sounds good. How can you argue with that? But the way these cats use rule of law, how all the New World Order internationalists use the rule of law, there is something very apersonal, unforgiving about it. And it's like, it just reminds me of like, I don't know, of somebody putting out a set of laws, man laws, and saying, there is no forgiveness if you step across this line, you're going to get vaporized. I just don't like the way they use it. I can't argue with what it says. Rule of law, what's the problem there? But the way they use it and how they keep on parroting it, like as in, unthinking repetition, this is not going to be good for us, for we, the little people. Okay, here we go. Back to Major Kessler's work. The vision of world order has remained fairly constant throughout the century. Specific strategies for attainment, though, have varied widely. The climax of the three most significant world emotional events in this century, World War I, World War II, and the Cold War, have provided the catalyst for successive attempts at New World Order. The first two attempts were manifested in the form of the League of Nations and the United Nations. The third attempt at achieving New World Order is much more complex, amorphous, and difficult to distinguish. Discernment of the third attempt is the subject of this chapter. Subhead: Third Try at New World Order. The epigraph quote on the previous page by F.S. Marvin referred to the world order precedent set by the formation of the League of Nations. Marvin was careful to point out, though, that the League was an important symbol, but not the genesis or end-all of world order. Quote, world cooperation, of which the League of Nations is the symbol and the chief organ, is the characteristic of the New Age. End of quote. He provides further clarification by describing the New World Order goal and limited role of the League. The League, then, though the chief political fact since the war, should be regarded as part only of a great movement and set of organizations, all having as their purpose to implement this new consciousness of world unity. Nationality must rank below the claims of mankind as a whole, but in its immediate effects on individuals, it is of greater moment. And that's the way it says, is of greater moment. So we can see, 65 years ago, there was perceived to be a New World Order movement toward world unity and decreased national/sovereignty. The League was an unparalleled symbol of the movement, but a symbol nonetheless. The League as a mechanism of the world order movement failed to fulfill expectations, largely due to lack of support from isolationist Americans. And here I also want to say that, the League of Nations wasn't making it because the United States, I don't think, most of the people wanted to be dragged into World War I, couldn't figure out why we were. They had the common sense that it had not yet been subject to 24/7 brainwashing with ubiquitous TV and radio and everything else about being fear-mongered enough like they did with Hitler. Germany was not coming across the ocean. I'm not saying it wasn't a bad thing that, that France had to deal with, and Belgium and Holland and, the other nations in Europe, but it had nothing to do with us. And, as the pilot Pete said to me once, and he goes, well, Britain was our allies. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what they call it. But what did they ever do for us? What did Britain ever do for us? They never had our backs. The only time we ever fought with or against England was against England. So anyway, that's the justification. You have to go over there and help them out. And, of course, what's really funny, no, it's not funny, it's pathetic, is that with all this fear-mongering, that the terrible Hun didn't cross the English Channel in 2 wars, how the heck are they going to get across the Atlantic? But anyway, we've said that to ad nauseum, and still I say it again. So it's true. The world, the United States didn't want to know about it because they had enough, I guess, independent thinkers out there who put 2 and 2 together and just didn't sit there drooling with their ears stuck against their radio or internet speaker or, their eyes, glued to the screen of Fox and the Alphabet networks and the Patriot networks as well. All right, recall from Chapter 2, the framework for the League of Nations was formulated by the Inquiry, the predecessor to the Council on Foreign Relations, World War II War and Peace Studies. World War II conveniently provided an opportunity for the founders of the UN to propose a second attempt at world order which would presumably account for the flaws inherent in the League structure. In Michael Walla's words, quote, the Council members, like so many other internationalists, were convinced that the United States should not let this second chance to participate in a supranational organization evaporate, end of quote. The establishment of the United Nations became the second attempt. Although more successful than its predecessor, the UN again failed to meet new world order expectations, largely because of the Cold War friction between the United States and the Soviet Union. I don't believe that for a fact, for a moment. If you take a look at what the UN has bourgeoned, it's got about 100 non-governmental organizations under its belt. They've been growing year by year, and it's not because the UN is feckless. It's been made to look that way, but they are the ones who I think you could say are the accountants, the business managers for what will be a world government. That they do have peacekeeping forces is something that is really, it's kind of got nothing to do with the UN structure itself. It's just a world police force that's made by other nations' military going to fight in other places. So you would never turn your guns on your own. No, the UN is doing what it's supposed to, and like 2 entities, the Vatican and the UN. And then if you want to throw in also the banking houses under the Rothschilds. Made to look like they don't really do anything and they couldn't possibly pull this crap off, and that's the best disguise. All right, going on. International dynamics had to change for the world to accept a credible UN fulfilling the vision of its founders. The trigger event was the fall of the Berlin Wall and corresponding end to the Cold War. Nah, I'm sorry, but again, the Soviet Union didn't collapse. It was downsized. It was told it was time to do other things, to open up other markets, which happened when East Germany went supposedly its own way, et cetera, et cetera. The Cold War, I don't know. The war never ended. It just never ended. We've been in a situation in the United States on the War Powers Act since December 8, 1941. Some would say even before then. It's always been that way now. So they tell us it's over. What's over? It's whatever. The fact, though, is the third attempt, very dissimilar to the first 2, was well underway prior to the event. Evidence of this was provided by Harlan Cleveland, former Assistant Secretary of State, former Ambassador to NATO, and member of the Council on Foreign Relations, in his comments regarding a 1976 report he helped author, entitled United Nations, released by the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. And here's a quote. I hope that in the hearing and whatever report is released by the committee, you will make a distinction between the future of the United Nations and the future of the world order. There is a long agenda of creative effort just ahead, a complex agenda of international action. Taking it all together, this amounts to a third try at world order, the League of Nations having died, and the United Nations being unable in its present condition to cope. Another subhead, New World Order paths. The third attempt, more complicated than the others, involves traversing 3 interlinked paths that pave the road to world order. One path involves strengthening the power of the United Nations and its associated institutions to enhance their world authority. The second path on the road to New World Order is through evolutionary regionalism. The idea is to develop regional entities that bind states through superstate political, economic, and legal arrangements, hence what you're seeing with the unions, European and North American. The third path is built on the foundation of piecemeal functionalism, whereby functional issues such as economics and trade, environmental conservation, and weapons of mass destruction proliferation drive international interdependence and further international law constraints. Much of piecemeal functionalism is directly related to UN subsidiaries. The following sections briefly describe the historical and recent support for the three paths on the road to world order. All right, under another subhead, United Nations strengthening. The call for strengthening the United Nations from the world order advocates has been strong and consistent. Robert Ducey, in his 1964 Foreign Affairs article, The World Order in the 60s, said that, quote, "It is indeed difficult to see how the world order is to be kept unless the United Nations undergoes a thorough overhaul. Not inconceivably, the two present superpowers may one day agree that the strengthening of the United Nations might be in the interest of both. If that happens, the future organization of the world might not be very dissimilar in principle from the one which was drafted in Dumbarton Oaks 20 years ago by the victors of World War II." And I think you all understand, right, that Foreign Affairs is a magazine. It is the house organ, if you will, of the Council on Foreign Relations. If you want to know where the world's going, hey, read that one, because apparently, as you've just seen as well, back in 1964, here you have an individual talking about it. And certainly, you know, we all know it goes back, at least to finding its way more often in print to the beginning of the 20th century, certainly between World War I and II. As World War II looked more like a reality, you heard more about this. A detailed plan for strengthening the UN was articulated by John Logue, Vice President of World Federalist Association. On December 4, 1985, he gave the following testimony to the Human Rights and International Organization Subcommittee of the House Foreign Affairs Committee joint hearing on the United Nations. And here we go in a block quote. "It is time to tell the world's people not what they want to hear, but what they ought to hear. We must reform, restructure, and strengthen the United Nations and give it the power and authority and funds to keep the peace and promote justice. The Security Council veto must go. One nation, one vote must go. The United Nations must have taxing power, what a surprise, or some other dependable source of revenue. It must have a large peacekeeping force. It must be able to supervise the dismantling and destruction of nuclear and other major weapon systems. An appropriate area, particularly in the area of peace and security, it must be able to make and enforce law on the individual." End of quote. Your rule of law. Over the last few years, going on with Kessler's work, almost all of those recommendations have been pursued by the United Nations and its supporters. As one example, Boutros-Ghali was aided by the Ford Foundation. Hey, now you're talking. And in parentheses, tax-exempt foundation linked to financing New World Order strategies, end of parentheses, and that's all you have to know, in creating an advisory group of financial specialists and bankers to identify, quote, dependable sources of revenue. You're always going to get tax, folks. I mean, that comes with the flesh and the earth and the devil. I mean, you're on this earth, it's his dominion. He's always going to have an IV in your veins, brother. Well, if you have faith, you always see him have the means to meet it. Another example was the previously discussed establishment of the International Law of the Sea Tribunal, providing the mechanism to make and enforce law on the individual. International Law of the Sea. Would that be like Admiralty law? Does that ring a bell to anybody? And why we have no constitution? The continuous strengthening and legitimization of the UN sets the stage for Bush's observation that, quote, not since 1945 have we seen a real possibility of using the United Nations as it was designed. Thank you for that. Subhead again, trilateral regionalism. The strategy of building world order on the framework of regionalism has also been around for quite some time. In 1929, N.S.B. Grass, in his Foreign Affairs article, Regionalism and Nationalism, stated, the direct effect of regionalism may be to make the state weaker politically, but stronger economically and socially. Or the region, looking to regional convenience, may make new alignments leading to the creation of new states or to international states, in parentheses, European, American, and so on, end of parentheses, or ultimately to a world state. Grass emphasized the importance of the region to a super state of some kind. The region which which, because it is nearer to the individual, is likely to exercise a more potent influence over him. A reasonably accurate fulfillment of this vision is found in the European community, which is well on its way to becoming a superstate containing its own political, economic, and judicial systems. And that's what we've been saying before, that it may very well be that the regional blocks, or some would say the trading blocks, they may be different, they may be the same. But the regional blocks that was envisioned by the Club of Rome back in the late 60s had 10 regions. There's some biblical implications here that's interesting, but that would probably be either an intermediate step to world rule, or it would be a regional form of it that actually has to execute, excuse the pun, the will of the world government. All right, moving on in Kessler's work, a more radical concept in the evolutionary development of world order regionalism was presented in 1949 by Maurice Parmelee in Geoeconomic Regionalism and World Federation. That's the title. Here's the quote: "There can be no permanent peace so long as each nation retains its sovereignty. There can be no effective world organization to solve the economic and social problems of mankind so long as the nation is the unit of organization. The region, limiting national sovereignty and furnishing a suitable unit of organization for a world federation, is a practicable solution." End of quote. Parmelee further specifies that regionalism postulates interdependence rather than self-sufficiency, and that geoeconomic regionalism is by far the most constructive proposal for the future of the world. In fact, geoeconomic interdependent regionalism is exactly the policy advocated and pursued over the last 25 years by the Trilateral Commission. The Trilateral Commission was founded in July 1973 by David Rockefeller, then Council on Foreign Relations Chairman of the Board. Let me read that back. Then Council on Foreign Relations Chairman of the Board. Yeah, well, he didn't begin the CFR because that happened in the 20s. That his old man was involved in it, as another thing. But certainly, with the Trilateralists, he was the founder. All right, now going back to the Trilateral Commission, its purpose was previewed by Zbigniew Brzezinski, former National Security Advisor, Council Director, and Trilateral Commission President, in his 1973 Foreign Affairs article when he stated that, quote, "The active promotion of such trilateral cooperation must now become the central priority of U.S. policy." Brzezinski and the Trilateral Commission took their mission very seriously. Creation of the Trilateral Commission reflects an awareness that the present moment is of very great importance for the future of mankind. With the Cold War still at the forefront of international relations, the Trilateral Commission seemed somewhat omniscient when in the 1970s they observed that the bipolar leadership system of the Cold War is diffusing into what may be the first truly global political system, with many actors playing significant parts at different levels. The Trilateral Commission recognized that this third attempt at world order, building a global political system primarily through economic interdependence, would not come quickly. And here's a block quote: "The renovation of the international system will be a very prolonged process. The system created after World War II is created through an act of will and human initiative in a relatively restricted period of time. One power had overwhelming might and influence, and others were closely associated with it. In contrast, a renovated international system will now require a process of creation, much longer and more complex, a process in which prolonged negotiations will have to be engaged and developed. In nurturing habits and practices of working together among the trilateral regions, the Commission should help set the context for these necessary efforts." That's the end of the quote. And remember, too, it's the Trilateral Commission that went over with Rockefeller in the forefront that told Gorbachev that it was time that the Soviet Union downsize and become involved in some of its satellites, should we say, in a greater global market. So this whole bit about this collapse, it was all hoodoo. You could call it a collapse. That's what they did, make you think that Russia was no longer a problem or the Soviet Union wasn't a problem. But, whatever they are now, and probably, in spades. So that whole situation was theater for us to think that, indeed, the Wicked Witch was dead. It's all about the money. Moving on with Kessler's work. The Commission's primary undertaking was to create a new international economic order through trilateral cooperation. Some of their early successes were highlighted by former Washington Post reporter Jeremiah Novak. This is a quote. According to the sources in the State Department, the trilateral papers have directly influenced the summoning of the Ramsey and Puerto Rican conferences, the sale of IMF gold, the Law of the Sea conferences, the formation of the International Energy Agency, and steps to establish a new international currency which replaces the U.S. dollar and gold. The Commission's record and its powerful influence after the 1976 elections deserve a great deal of respect. And that's interesting, again, that statement would be made after the 1976 elections, because James Earl Carter, Jimmy, was a charter member of the Trilateral Commission. And his rise to prominence, as I've stated before, during the primaries for the 1976 election, when this guy, was just kicking butt in every single primary, and I was going like, who is this guy? And where did this all come from? But that was a manipulation of the Democratic Party. Their voters in primaries, that this would be the guy. Or maybe it was all faked. Who knows? But Carter comes out of nowhere. And I'm sorry, being governor of Georgia is just, it's nowhere. and he wins this thing. And, of course, Jimmy broke my heart because he actually sounded like a Christian, but you can't serve two masters. And although he's probably had a little bit more dignity and class in his post-presidential years, still in all, he knows the way things go if he is a member of the Trilateral Commission and was groomed and given the way things really are by Rockefeller, Brzezinski, and Kissinger. So after the 1976 elections, that the Trilateral Commission would be more prominent was because their boy just became president, albeit just for 4 years. But that set the stage for what we still see to this day, and that is what, as it stands now, a 27-year continuum of the two crime families, Bush and Clinton. Well, I didn't have sex with that woman. Because Ronnie, after he gets shot, 2 months into his presidency, what a bummer, right? Understands what the deal is. So we have Daddy Bush for two terms during Reagan's time. Reagan, they put out in front because he was electable. And, everybody loved Ronnie. Tell me another story, Ronnie. But it was actually Daddy Bush that was pulling the strings. Then he got his own 4-year presidency, and then he was, quote, defeated by Clinton, who went in there with what? 2 terms of his own, who then had to step down and give way to, boom, guess what? Shrub for another 8 years. And now we're going back to Clinton. Does anybody get this? These two are not cats and dogs, the Bushes and Clintons. And that Bush would walk around, Daddy Bush would walk around with Clinton at all the catastrophes that we've had of late. These guys were buddies before. So, anyways, that's the richness of identifying 1976 as being a threshold moment for the Trilateral Commission. Moving on in Kessler's work, and we're almost done, I promise. Recall that trilateral regionalism presents only one world order path. In the words of William Hoare, spelled H-O-A-R, don't get excited. He says, quote, trilateralism is only a way station on the road to New World Order. Boutros-Ghali provided the contemporary linkage between regionalism and the first path to world order, UN strengthening. In his Agenda for Peace speech, Boutros-Ghali said, quote, regional arrangements or agencies can render great service if their activities are undertaken in a manner consistent with the purposes and principles of the Charter, end of quote. His focus at that point was security arrangements, but the concept of regional linkage to UN authority applies universally. Not to lose sight of the objective of this analysis interpreting George Bush's meaning of a New World Order, it is important to come full cycle to Bush's vision as articulated to the UN General Assembly, when he said, I see a world building on the emerging new model of European unity, not just Europe, but the whole world whole and free. Now, under the third subhead, piecemeal functionalism, this is interesting. The final and most intriguing path supporting the third attempt at world order is referred to as piecemeal functionalism. Several Council on Foreign Relations related authors. Okay, all right. This isn't Spellcheck didn't help him out here. Okay, let me read this. Should have been, it's a compound adjective. They should have been hyphenated. But anyway, several Council on Foreign Relations related authors and studies have advocated world order strategies based on piecemeal functionalism. The Trilateral Commission recommends piecemeal functionalism as a means of achieving the interdependence between nations and regions, as discussed in the previous section. The 1977 Trilateral Commission Task Force report towards a renovated international system laid out a specific definition and strategy for piecemeal functionalism. Quote, in general, the prospects for achieving effective international cooperation can often be improved if the issues can be kept separate, what we call piecemeal functionalism. Coalitions of specialists can be built across national boundaries in specific functional areas, blunting the nationalism that might otherwise hinder international agreement. The same countries which will often indulge in fanciful rhetoric in a broad multi-purpose organization, in parentheses such as various UN agencies, end of parentheses, will often be negotiating seriously and cooperatively in other organizations, such as GATT, on the same issue at the very same time. And here we go. Richard N. Gardner, former Carter advisor, ambassador to Italy, council member, and Columbia University law professor, presented the most revealing look at an integrated New World Order strategy in his 1974 Foreign Affairs article, The Hard Road to World Order. He answered the call for an innovative third attempt at world order by advocating a decentralized, functional, in a dashed off that says piecemeal functionalism, approach anchored by the rule of law and integrated with the United Nations. And a word about Gardner is that we've read this article in toto a couple of, it's probably 2 months ago. Also, we read a backup article to that entitled The World Action Plan to Limit Population Growth. Gardner is he's a rat bastard. There's no two ways about it. And anyway, we're going to read a bit of what he wrote in that work, The Hard Road to World Order. Here we go. It's a block quote. In this unhappy state of affairs, few people retain much confidence in the more ambitious strategies for world order that had wide backing a generation ago. If instant world government, charter review, and a greatly strengthened international court do not provide the answers, what hope for progress is there? The answer will not satisfy those who seek simple solutions to complex problems, but it comes down essentially to this. The hope for the foreseeable future lies not in building up a few ambitious central institutions of universal membership and general jurisdiction, as was envisaged at the end of the last war, but rather in the much more decentralized, disorderly, and pragmatic process of inventing or adapting institutions of limited jurisdiction and selected membership to deal with specific problems on a case-by-case basis, as the necessity for cooperation is perceived by relevant nations. You try to figure out what that means. All right, here we go. Such institutions of limited jurisdiction will have a better chance of doing what must be done to make a rule of law possible among nations. In short, the house of world order will have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. It will look like a great booming, buzzing confusion, but an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than an old-fashioned frontal assault. Of course, for political as well as administrative reasons, some of these specialized arrangements should be brought into an appropriate relationship with the central institutions of the UN system. That's the end of the block quote. I mean, he said it right there. That's all you have to know. An end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece. Well, what don't we understand about this? There you have it right there. And I'm looking around because I'm thinking, Gardner's, when I read Gardner's, The Hard Road to World Order, it may still be up on the archives. I'm not sure. If not, well, then it just has been amalgamated into one of the volumes of CDs. But, the rule of law, I'm getting so sick of hearing that. All right, the last paragraph in this chapter 7, or rather 6, of The Road to New World Order, which is just one chapter of an academic paper written by Major Bart R. Kessler back in March 1997, and that is Bush's New World Order, the meaning behind the words. And I'm not saying he's in favor of this or he's not in favor of this. It's just that he understands that it is, and that's more than anybody really knew about amongst most of us in the street 10 years ago. And here's the last paragraph by Kessler for this chapter. Gardner's specific functional institution building issues were the international monetary system, international trade, environment, population explosion, food shortages, the world's oceans, weapons proliferation, and peacekeeping. Understand also with these concerns of his, food shortages. That's what's coming down the pike too. There'll be energy shortages beyond oil. There'll be water shortages, and there'll be food shortages. It's a lot to look forward to. Here we go. All of those issues have indeed been catalysts for international action over the last 23 years. It's apparent that the international growth of interdependence at the functional level that we have experienced over the last quarter of a century may not have been the result of random, booming, buzzing confusion, but in fact a more calculated strategy of world order. 23 years seems to be beyond the planning range of most, but not Gardner and certainly not the Council. Gardner realistically explained that, quote, some may object that a generation of arduous and possibly futile negotiations on specific functional problems is not a very inspiring prospect. The road to world order will still be a long and hard one, but since the shortcuts do not lead anywhere, we have no choice but to take it. And that will end this chapter 6, The Road to New World Order. The link will probably always say World Order as far as what you're looking for in the URL. And we're going to go into Chapter 7 next time around and look into other things that might be of interest. Not that I'm the one that's supposed to be the gatekeeper, so to speak, but some of this you already know. So anyway, I'm not going to excise things that I don't agree with. I've not done that. I'm never going to do that. But I'd like to get to the good stuff because time is of the essence. And I think the stuff should be out there as a matter of, being on the record, even on this side of the street, because this is the history of how we got to where we are today and where we're going in the future. Thanks very much for listening to this episode of the Grassy Knoll, and we will see you next week.